change. It's not always just, I don't know. So I feel like there's a panicking mood, sort of. But anyways, all right. So what were some of the key ideas or phrases, or if anything, what sentence stems did you guys create from a literal aspect as well as an analytical aspect? I know I kept focusing. I guess maybe it's the training. I kept going to analytical. Now I was getting my babies who might need the literal very much first. Like, what is happening? What's going on? Like even with game, I don't think the kids would know like game. It's not just something you play. Like game refers to being hunted. So, what were some questions, CFUs or guiding questions that you guys were able to come up with for any of your categories? That's what I kind of put in. I was gonna say, or what were some of the key points that you guys picked up for your categories or for your standards?
So for conflict, he starts to build up the tension early, like, and he uses suspense to do that. So like, it's hard to talk about them separately because they all kind of go hand in hand. But like, he uses the suspense to make them think about how game and how Ship Trap Island is, how are they going to be important at some point in the story.
Okay. So I'm trying to figure out, is there a way we can frame that?
I know, that's I'm trying to find a low level question that asks that, but
you might have to scaffold it and say something as simple like, what does Whitney say to Rainsford early on in the story? What could this foreshadow? That's it. Like, and you break it off into two pieces rather than saying like, how does the author's diction create a suspenseful mood? Like, you can break it off into two levels. So that kind of goes with characterization. How we describe, pretend this is a question. Describe Rainsford. Which one's the bad guy? Is it Whitney? Okay. Describe Whitney. And then from there, you can have the kids pay attention to his actions. Like, as far as setting up questions like, how is he, what does he do that makes him come off as, and then plays into one of those things.
Further question?
Yes.
Further suspense, I was just noticing, like the language he was using, a lot of imagery and just like paying attention to the setting will kind of like help kids to understand how he's building the suspense.
So,
I don't have any questions.
Yeah, I think I wrote, what imagery, I'm gonna just spill it over here. What imagery is being depicted? Or how would you how would you describe the setting? Yeah, I just was like, cause they kind of blended together. But from a analytical standpoint, it was more like, how does the author's diction, the author's regarding the setting, create a suspenseful mood. And this, I'm hoping that they will be able to pick up like the dark, the Ship Trap Island, they can't see it, the moonless night, the black velvet. Even when it comes to imagery, like I always tell the kids, imagery is not just sight, it's what you can smell, it's what you can touch, it's what you can feel, your sensory overload. Anything else?
For characterization, I know for literal, I kind of went with steel, for the literal, so like going through and like what is the speech reveal about them, what is all of those things that are in steel. And then the other questions that I wrote, one, I haven't read it in its entirety, but the first few pages appear to be magical realism when I immediately look at it, and so I wonder how the genre actually plays into how he develops the characters. But I haven't read it in its entirety to know that it's magical realism, but the idea of there being superstitions made me go in that direction. The other two questions I wrote is, what is the author's purpose for Rainsford experiencing the conflict alone? Which that might be something that is answered later on, but that's one of the questions that I asked, because he does experience, he falls off by itself. It's intentionally written into the story, so why does he do that? And then the other question was, what does Rainsford swimming towards the sound reveal about his character? As opposed to away from it.
Yeah, I'm gonna write that. I can't remember the story. Was it intentional? Like, it wasn't just a coincidence? Like, he Yeah. So y'all know what's happened. So the guy is hunting him. So when he even makes that statement,
So Whitney is
Like
the
the
short
short
film.
Mhm. So he's hunting him. I think he says there's one line where he says he was talking about he was like, who cares about how the jaguar feels, and he's talking
And he
about.
says everybody is either a hunter or huntee.
So that's
That
the
kind of builds the
foreshadowing.
suspense as well. I noticed that, but I didn't really, like, I couldn't say.
Yeah, and I think you would need to reread it a second time or go, and then you're like, oh, yeah, that is a red flag. Like, that is.
He also said something too where he's like, I can't find it. It's like where you hear the shots, you find men, and where you find the men, you find food. And it's kind of like a double entendre
Yeah.
because it's like, you think you're talking about animals, but he's talking about the people, like the people and food.
They also, when they talked about the cannibalism.
And the kids didn't pick up on cannibalism. Like that was one of the words, cause like they did, yeah. And I was gone like 2 days last week, so like I didn't really get to dive in deep with them. But yeah,
Yeah, it's
vocab was
The freshman read.
Yeah. So.
Anything else? Because all of this again ties into conflict. When I taught middle school, we always had the kids, no matter what, look for characterization, conflict, and resolution. The characterization one was the inference. It was highly inference based, but I think that model was kind of stuck on literal, and occasionally with conflict, and it would go down to analytical. But we couldn't get to these because obviously you need to read the whole story in order to figure out why. He mentions whoever created this mentioned like Connell's experience in World War I may have contributed to the story's message, and I'm like, what is the message? But I think you would need to read the full outcome of the story in order to understand. I don't know what my thing was. All right. Okay. So what we're gonna do now before we start turning you guys loose, lesson plans are due today, and like I said, I am guilty of the sit and get and just having the kids take notes and stuff. So we're gonna work on adding rigor in every capacity. I feel like for my classes, I have the rigor as far as the guiding questions and the exit ticket, but I cannot lie when it comes to the I&M and introducing new material, I could step it up a lot. All right, so we're trying to add more challenge to our I&Ms, our guiding questions, and to our assessments. If anything, how can we make it stickier? How can we make it resonate with the students? Again, like I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons I hated English in high school is because I just felt like it was all irrelevant. Like it was just read, answer questions, read, write an essay, read, write an essay. As always, as far as adding rigor to your guiding questions, your exit tickets, make sure that you're matched up like trajectory-wise with the questions and with the new EOC format. Make sure, even if it's not just with the sentence stem, but even in the format. So having them choose 2 or more, I don't know how many answers they get to choose, like where they have to choose more than one. Having them write the CERs or open-ended responses. So yeah, just getting them to practice, having it aligned in the format, as well as the sentence stems. I know I take release questions for the DP exams and just switch it out and or tailor it to whatever we're working on. But I just pulled this down. Maybe I should just leave it up. All right, so again, the sit and gets. This is a screenshot of mine because again, I am a fan of just fill in the blank and we got stuff to do. Let's keep going. However, I will own that it's not as sticky as it could be. And I might add pictures this is for today's lesson plan too, so I really need to, actually kind of did it yesterday. So what are some alternatives to sit and gets? How can we increase the rigor? How can we spice things up so they're not just taking notes? I'll keep pulling it down. I'm not gonna put it back down. Anyway.
Ways to make notes student-led. I like to play with expert groups, so if I have like 3 different things that they're looking at, I have 3 different groups looking at each component and then teaching one another.
Is that like jigsaw?
Kind of.
All right. Anything else? What else do you guys use for introducing your material?
Like if you had the pictures, you could probably do like a gallery walk or something real quick.
With your gallery walk, do you guys include questions or like a chart for them, something to take notes with?
Maybe like a gallery question.
Structured gallery walk. I don't know. All right. Anything else for introducing I&Ms or increasing rigor so they're not just filling in the blanks or taking notes. Again, I get it. It is quick, it is easy, but is it memorable for the kids? So is it memorable for them? So how do we make it come alive for them as they're about to jump in? I think these are even hooks, I guess.
A quick
online.
video, like a,
Mm-hmm.
like a 2 minute, 2 to 3 minute video.
Real scenarios.
Real scenarios. I'm a big fan of debates, and well, these kids are okay. My 7th period was dry, and everybody agreed. I hate when they do that. Can y'all? Somebody played. I've been told that if a kid is willing or able to play devil's advocate and go against the grain, it's a sign of intelligence. So a lot of my students last year would step up. I would tell them that, and they would step up to the challenge and be like, "I'm going to force myself to take a position I don't like, and I'm gonna argue it down." So I don't know. One of those girls went into criminal justice, so I'm proud of that. Anyway, so she likes her sociology class. She's like, "No, he had to see this experiment, and it's so much fun." Anyways. Anything else that we can use? Student-led expert groups, which I like. Jigsaw, gallery walks, quick video.
Charades.
Oh, yes. I saw this with Paris, said she saw it. Those little games, especially if it's a review.
Yeah.
If it's a review, I guess, and they've already known the word, been taught the words before, they would have the word appear, and then the kids would have to do the call out, but I don't know.
I never thought to do that.
I don't know what that game is called.
Heads up.
Okay.
And then, Leap For has a lot of ways that you can, that's just a resource, a lot of different things that you can do to make things student-led, in terms of like turning notes into games.
Okay. Lead forward.
It's actually like Lead For, number 4.
I'm just writing cursive so y'all can't tell. That's what okay. So resources. Alright, anything else? Any best practices that you guys use when it comes to introducing new material or adding more rigor, or just again making it stickier or something somewhat of a challenge besides copying down the notes, hooking them in? And yeah, I'm gonna take a picture of this before I erase it. What we want you guys, we're gonna practice on Ms. Hales. I know this is like the first week and the first week, so it's really just setting up the course. But we're gonna practice and play with it, and then I'm gonna turn you guys loose to do it on your own with your own lesson plans. And I'm in that group to revise stuff, so. I said I wouldn't pull it down. Alright, so we're gonna look at a sample lesson. Do they have a copy of the agendas, like?
Their PLC agenda?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Hale, do you mind sending out your if y'all go to the lesson plan tracker, click on Hale's from last week. English 2 from last week of 8/14.
Cause I have the slides. Or maybe we can do that. We can just I know you had them divided into different groups, right?
I don't remember this.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Hold on.
This is when that day we came in, Ms. Hale.
And then did they watch different, or if you wanna explain the lesson, and then we can add in like what we can do, yeah. Never mind, I'm gonna stay on book on task. This is,
So they had the do now was, what makes a good poem. And they had to like think about it, then they talked about it, they watched the Tupac video,
mm-hmm.
and then they revised what makes a good poem, like their answer. And then I told them about Emily Dickinson, and how people think she's a great poet. And I kinda went over, without like explicitly teaching them figurative language, like these are the things. Cause they are, from their answers, they basically were like, oh, a good poem has rhyme, it has all these things. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna use your answers to look for that in this poem. And then I asked them a question, is this a good poem? Some agreed, some was like, nope, it's still not great. And then the next one was A Poison Tree. Most kids agreed that this one was better. And that's because they liked that it rhymed, it had in rhyme, they liked that they felt like they could feel that the guy was angry. And then they did one on their own. They did Raven, but they didn't do. We broke it down to where some kids had different stanzas, and so they had to answer those questions based on like, do they think that's a good poem? Like what criteria are they using to figure out if this is a good poem?
Okay. So, and that was their independent practice?
Yeah, and I think that was it. Or I gave them the definition after they were basically able to tell me what a good poem was, but my exit ticket did not match mine. That's what we talked about. It didn't align to my standard.
So I was thinking off the top, maybe we can use maybe we can use a shorter poem, because I know the Raven is kind of long, and create an exit ticket. And again, like I know this was like an introductory lesson, so it's just introducing them to poetry. But maybe we can create an exit ticket based on different standards, or even what they had discussed earlier, or what they've been working on. So there's alignment between what makes a good poem and your exit tickets, or even tying it into EOC. I was about to say ACT. EOC.
I even think Jones too, just going back to just our phases of close reading, how can just that question alone, like what makes a good poem, do we think that question is rigorous?
I think the question could be evaluative once once it's read. I think it could be one of the most rigorous questions that you could ask, but it depends on how the rest of the lesson is structured to get there.
Okay, what you say, Ms. Gilmore? Because the question is this poem, and this is not an attack on you, Hale, this can go for anybody, but just the question, is this a good poem, is not in itself rigorous.
Right. So I feel like, do nows, I try to do two things. One, I'm trying to see what you know. Two, I'm trying to see what I need to talk about. So I feel like I would say, what are the key components of a poem?
So that's why they kind of figurative language and all that.
Well, yeah, I think it's sorry, I got some stuff in my throat. I think for like a do now, just to introduce, right? But I'm saying like as we move, because I think you said you asked it on the third poem during their independent practice. Okay, does this make a good poem? So like that kind of question at that point in the lesson wouldn't be considered rigorous at all. I would say, and I think just moving forward, just the practice amongst the English department, this is something that we're gonna take to other departments as well, humanities especially. If we can start forming all of our questions in these different phases. So if you think about like at the beginning of a class, during a do now, I'm trying to gauge what scholars know about poetry, and so I'm gonna ask them what they consider a good poem, right? They've been reading poems since fourth grade. So what makes a good poem? By the end of that lesson, I should be asking, if nothing else, an analytical question. So like a question, how does this text express itself? So like, let's think, how does the author's use of rhyme give X, Y, and Z, right? So like, how are we measuring?
Use imagery
to express X, Y, and Z. Because we already know, you said at the beginning, like when they were sharing out for the do nows, they're saying, oh, rhyme makes a good poem, imagery, whatever they were saying, right? So by the time they get to that exit ticket, okay, how does that figurative language do X, Y, and Z? So that's just a quick way we can be more rigorous with this lesson.
I was gonna say, it's up to you. We have 18 minutes left, I think, 18 minutes. Is it okay if we just implement it on our now lessons? Like,
yep.
Because I feel like she corrected, like she said it, like, cause this was
and
like
we talked about this in our O3 a little bit too,
so like, can we use this time to edit the lesson plans that we submit to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
And just moving forward, I'm gonna send y'all this email too. If y'all want, I can laminate these for y'all so y'all can, I give you a hard copy. But if we can start, when I come into your classrooms, I might ask a question like, hey, because I talked to Gilmore about this, it helps if you use the same anchor text for at least 2-3 lessons, because you can get deeper into this, and so scholars move away from just comprehending. Now they already know what the story is about, and they can think conceptually about the story. So it's same with poetry, right? But poetry, that's a little different because it takes a quick second, but especially with short stories. So it might be a time I walk into your class and say, hey, what
Right.
number of close reader. If you say 3 and we still asking literal questions, then we know that's not rigorous because this is the third time reading it.
Mhm.
We no longer care about a gist, right? Like we already know the gist. We knew that 2 reads ago. So just keep in mind, like when you're planning, making sure all your questions during the lessons are aligned to the phases of close reading that you're in. Like you should be deeper and deeper. Honestly, literal, you probably won't spend a whole class on literal. Literal and analytical, you can get to that in one class. But as you go on through the text, the questions should become more and more rigorous.
So how would that look like when we're doing like a novel? Like, I know that we won't read the entire novel, but like, if they're reading certain parts, how
Excerpts.
do I get them to kind of still understand what's going on, like from the part that we missed?
So you can take pool suggestion and do like scholars are reading different parts.
Oh,
So like this group might read chapter 1, this group might read chapter 2,
And they
and
talk
that
about-
scholar go to the conceptual and be able to teach, and that gives you a better understanding of if that group is understanding that.
Got you. So that was called the scholar.
What was
You
it?
wrote it on
Something teach, scholar teach,
Jigsaw?
peer teach.
expert.
Oh,
Expert
expert.
teach, okay. Yeah,
Expert.
so that's the way to do it. How do you do it, Jones?
I do literal a lot. It's the lower kids, they need literal. I feel like at this group, most of them already pick up what's happening. So I will admit sometimes I skip a step and I'll go straight to this, because this is our end goal. And they're a little shocked by this right now. Like, whoa. The other thing I will do is in my laps. So I'm listening, and I might include for a question, I might have down, like, tell me what it's about, or like describe it, and then I'll switch gears to these questions. So it's literally like
That's like a quick stop shot.
yeah, so it might be, I'm doing this. So, one question might be a literal, and the next one is analytical. And I'll keep climbing higher and higher, but I'll do that. My questions are scaffolded so that hopefully by the end of class they're here. Their exit tickets are normally in the evaluative or conceptual area, but in order to have them get here, their guiding questions are literally guiding to that point. So they always get mad at me, they're like, Miss, you're not collecting the guided questions? I'm like, no, because you need it for your exit ticket. So hopefully, you'll see literal, but that's just like the first question, and then it's getting deeper and deeper and deeper into like, tell me what's the meaning of it, what does this predict, or what does this foreshadow?
And I will say a push for you all, especially Hale, and I'm just saying this because we walked you through your class, they gave you so much praise on scholars, like you got them hooked. They come in, they start on their do now. I don't know if it was because we were in there, but the routines and systems are there. You don't have a lot of behavior problems, if any, in that class anyway. Didn't see behavior problems. So you got the scholars where you want them, like they are ready to learn. I would push them to more analytical and conceptual. I know you think like, oh, I'm just introducing it. Let me just start with a literal. Start with analytical, just to see, because that exposure, like they're gonna meet the bar, and you have scholars at a good place to where they're gonna attempt and really try. You know what I mean? So you can scaffold when necessary, but start at the standard you want them to go to and work backwards.
I have a question. You know how last week, I think that was last week, Dumas was talking about starting with theme and seeing how everything else connects to theme. One of the things I do specifically with novels, especially when I introduce the novel, is I give them one theme because the story can carry many different ones, and then I'll go in and I'll study like structure, but then seeing how does the structure actually help them to deliver a message, right? And so sometimes I actually start with that conceptual in my conversation so that they can connect those other things to the conceptual, if that makes sense. Starting with and then they can actually see those other themes that the story carries, because it's not limited to one usually.
Yeah, but you just give them one. Okay.
Jones, did you go over this part today? Annotate?
Yes,
Okay,
we did.
okay. So next week, as you all are planning for next week's lesson, and it might not be perfect right now, but this is what I want us to build to. Make sure on that writing academic habits, whatever text you all are using, I want to come in and be able to see your exemplar of annotation. And then making sure all your questions are aligned to the phases of reading you're in. So that's the push for next week. The annotation for meaning. So like a lot of times I see teachers, and this goes across all content areas, a lot of teachers like, okay, go ahead and start reading, annotate. But
they
that's
don't give them like
annotate for what? What are we looking for? So it's really important that I'm sure Jones covered it, but.
Yes. I was gonna say, because same thing, the 45 minutes is shaking me down, but I'm kind of giving up on it. So they're focusing on an excerpt. The first question is always literal, so like, describe the house, or how does it compare to Dick and Jane's house? And then I'll go into an analytical question. So, why do you think, why? So not just identify the juxtaposition, but why do you think the author makes this juxtaposition? So I'll typically like seesaw-ish. It always starts with a literal question, and then it gets deeper and deeper. So once they tackle the part that I want them to focus on, now I'm like, I want you to play with it a little bit. But yeah, we'll do the excerpts. So is it safe to say next week or whenever we meet again, everybody bring a copy of their exemplar and lesson plan so they can work on their own? And we can
Yeah, and even if you want, like, since you got a week now, if y'all want to finish reading Most Dangerous Game, just like we can go through a close phase 2, a close reading, we can get down to those conceptual and evaluative questions. What kind of questions does those look like? So go ahead and read The Most Dangerous Game between now and the next week.
And it's gonna be Thursday, every Thursday?
No, it really depends on my week.
Okay.
I wanted to do today Thursday because we had the 90 minutes. So when it's block week, I am gonna use one of those block days. Thursday, it'll be Thursday.
Okay.
But yeah. But yes to what you said, Jones.
Oh, bringing in our own exemplars and.
Yes, bring in your own exemplars. It could be a future lesson, just so you get feedback from one another on, or it could be one that you already did. I would suggest one in the future, just so you can perfect it with one another.
Because I know sometimes I've gotten into a lull where I'm like, I feel like the kids are just reading and answering questions and writing, reading, answering, and it gets stale. And I'm like, English is the one class I'm paranoid of losing kids on, because I'm like, I know I got bored with it. So I'm like, how do I spice it up? Like, what can I do that's different? And yeah.
I'm going to share with all of y'all these media lenses that I use. It's like 8 different ones, but they're like, sometimes I do like a characterization lens, but one of the lenses I've been using with the seniors since they were juniors is more so in that E, and so it's like a spiritual lens or a new criticism lens or a race lens or a psychological lens, and it has guided questions for each of those. And they might be things that you can use for annotating, having scholars do meaningful annotations, so they're looking for a specific, through a specific lens to annotate.
I know, I've used annotation trackers. This is super old, and I've revamped it since then, but yet similarly, they'll have one where I'll give them an excerpt. This was for a graphic novel, and this was also, so they'll have a panel, or they'll tell me like the description, like the literal, and then they'll go in, based on what we're reading, I'll tell them, all right, you're identifying any of these things. So, and then we'll have questions. But yeah, I'll develop annotation trackers, so it is more structured, but it does give them something to look for, something to read, instead of, because they're, like even today, they're like, if I were to just tell them read it, I'm like, are they